ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Well, hello there, and welcome back to yet another FileMaker tutorial. We are going to learn more about FileMaker Pro, and in this video in particular, something very important, and that is the security of your FileMaker system and solutions. Let's head to my desktop and take a look at what I'm talking about. All right, thank you for joining me here on my desktop. As you can see, what I've got right here is a web browser. Now, we are not going to be going through a FileMaker technique in this video, learning about some type of FileMaker feature, but what we are learning about is probably one of the most important things that you could ever want to know about in the world of FileMaker. Now, above me, I am going to put two different versions. If you are using a copy of a FileMaker server that is not one of those two versions as of the shooting of this video, then your FileMaker system can be accessed, can be hacked, can be fully exposed with full privileges. I mean absolute, the same power that you have as a developer, and it can be done by a hacker that is a ghost. Meaning there is nothing that is logged, there is no one that knows that they're even in the database at all. So for the remainder of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my understanding of the hack. Well, there's multiple of them, to be honest. But in general, what we're going to do is we're going to start from a high-level view of how do you assess and know what is the security landscape of the software you're using. In this particular case, it's dealing with FileMaker and FileMaker Server. So stick with me throughout this video as we take a little tour about how you can investigate the security landscape. Now, initially, there was a pretty big brouhaha because this security hole that was found by a researcher, which in particular, his name is on screen right now, Alexei Dubov. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Probably not. But it was found that this ghost account, it's not even an account, this ability to enter a FileMaker hosted database system as a ghost is so detrimental, and yet Claris, which is owned by Apple, at the time or up until actually today, the day of me shooting this video, they were going to give him nothing. You've heard about a bug bounty. You've heard about the fact that security researchers, pen testers, penetration testers, they all spend time, a lot of their time, where they could be doing work, find out where there's a security hole, reveal it to the company, and he was going to get nothing. But it is my honor to actually say they came good, or they made good on a situation where they actually gave some compensation to Alexei for finding this particular security hole. Now, in this video, we're going to be going over multiple security holes. I have read the pages. I have a pretty good understanding, although I'm not going to get in and I'm not going to go into the hex and find out what the hex is, convert that. Oh, we're talking about a binary file, find the file format, etc. Although in this video, I'm going to show you another penetration tester who does explain something that I have known about going back well before the 90s. In fact, I'll switch over to it right now. There's this solution that you have always been able to get access to at passware.com. And back in the day, I started with FileMaker a long time ago when you were able to actually hack FileMaker files and the FileMaker solution itself. In fact, software was very open, and it was at a time and period before the companies that release the software, in this case Apple and Claris, where they would all of the things that compose a particular piece of software, it was sort of like the Wild West. It was open. You could use a tool called ResEdit. You could go in, you could hack these things called nib files, change the UI of how FileMaker actually looked, the calculation dialog boxes, do all kinds of things to hack, in a positive sense, your copy of FileMaker. But you could also do the same in the negative sense. And one of the things we're going to find out in this video is that some of the old legacy things that are part of this long lineage of FileMaker, because they are still there, it is one of the holes that Alexei found. So stick with me as we go through a process of how do you survey the security landscape of FileMaker in terms of what's going on. Don't worry, I'll get back to that past where we'll talk about that. I've got that lined up here as one of the many articles that we'll be talking about from a security standpoint. But in this particular day and age, there is an incentive to find zero-day exploits, especially if information is housed, priority information. And I happen to know that not only Apple, but Claris themselves, they say there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that use FileMaker. And if you could find those FileMaker systems, if you've got an ability to get in as a ghost and just hack in and see whatever you want to see, how detrimental is that? That is severe. So in our current landscape, the way that you find issues is by simply knowing where those issues are announced. By and large, there is this organization, NIST, the right here, National Vulnerability Database. Now, what they do is they collect all of the different possible vulnerabilities of all of the software out there. Maybe it covers more than software, but you can see that I'm here on a search page where you can search for things. Now, for us, the easiest thing to do is put in the word FileMaker. But before we even go there, let's go with, you know nothing about CVEs, about NIST or what have you, and you're just going to Claris and you want to find out a security hole. Well, if you go to support.claris.com and then you search for something like security, you're going to get a broad range of all kinds of things related to security. And maybe you don't even know about the word CVE. But if you do, or you hear about it through whatever media you follow, whether it's Twitter, if Claris sends out an announcement, if there is a Slack channel or a bulletin board or something that you're on, you ultimately end up getting to a particular security item. Now, this particular item that we have on screen is the item that Alexi found. And we can see, I've already showed you the two numbers. If you are using a FileMaker server that is less than 20.3.2 or less than 19.6.4, your server is wide open. And the information is now publicly available. We'll take a look at that, how we saw that. Now, if we look at this right here, and it's unfortunately on two lines, but CVE-2024, the year that it was, and then the number that was assigned to that vulnerability or that exploit, if we select and copy this CVE dash, that is one way that we can go back to Claris's support. Now, this is not my preferred way of looking for this, but this will search FileMaker or Claris's support database. Let's put in CVE, Matt, CVE dash, and do a search. This is a way to search Claris's own support database of anything that they have actually mentioned with regards to a vulnerability. Now, we can see that we've got results 1 out of 13 here, and we're not going to use the results themselves per se as a specific correlation to what we do over in the NIST database, but this is what we are interested in, being able to find what are the true security issues of FileMaker and do they apply to me. For example, going through here, the Apache Log4j, this was a big one. This really applied if you were using a version of FileMaker that happened to have Java or used Java for the server side of the admin. If you had updated past one of the versions where FileMaker does still have Java on FileMaker Server, but where Java was used for the admin side versus not used for the admin side, you have to know what the implications are. So for example, the Monkey Bread plugin, and because of the fact that FileMaker is not a sandboxed application, it will dynamically load in a plugin and you're able to access what that plugin can do, and the plugin can in turn access the file system. If you are not encrypting your FileMaker solutions, it is possible to actually access and have delivered a FileMaker file from a FileMaker server that uses the Monkey Bread plugin, if you can see that, by simply not recognizing that you have an extended security privilege that is either turned on or not turned on that allows a URL to use a parameter. And within that parameter, you can put a monkey bread function, and that call will in turn invoke a chain of disclosures or a way to what they call moving laterally within the security landscape to find a way to get a FileMaker database transferred to you, which in turn, you then just simply use this if the solution's not encrypted, and you simply overwrite where the master password would be with something that's known. So again, this has been the situation for FileMaker for a long time. This particular solution, Passware, and their ability to replace a FileMaker solution. In fact, as we scroll down here, 1Password, let's go down to where FileMaker is, and it shows you. This goes all the way back to FileMaker 3, as I mentioned a long time ago. And you can see that what it's saying is instant recovery up until it gets to the point of instant removal. So you can see that there's a distinction here between FileMaker 6 and FileMaker 7. And FileMaker 7 is when we got the relational format. They changed the file format underneath. And at that point, you couldn't actually extract the FileMaker password from the file. You could replace it with a known value, and that goes all the way up to our modern FileMaker 2023. So if you're not using encryption at rest on your FileMaker solutions or your FileMaker files, and somebody can get hold of a FileMaker file, a publicly available tool is so easily available that you can get this. Now we're going to go through, I'll show you the article and the URL where there is a full breakdown of how the password is stored. But you need to be aware of these things. So heading back to the whole, okay, I found out that I can use CVE dash and I can go search FileMaker support, but FileMaker support is really sort of convoluted. It's got all of the different support articles. How can I find just the security articles? Well, that's where we go over to NIST, and we are going to use its search, and we're simply just going to put in the word FileMaker. So searching FileMaker here, and not Claris per se, because Claris has been FileMaker Inc. and been Claris. We want to find everything that deals with the software FileMaker. And if this comes up, oh good, it does in a relatively decent time. Again, we're not comparing that FileMaker is trying to not show that they had 16 individual CVEs, but there is 16 matching records in the NIST database for vulnerabilities. Now, if we look at these, what's really nice is we are looking at this from a publishing date in descending, and we can see when these CVEs were published. Now, when they are published does not mean that it is when the vulnerability was found. In most cases, in fact, if we look at the vulnerability, that's the cross one. I forget which one it is. I'd have to look at the, well, let's look at the CVE. It was 277.90. We go back over here, 277.90 right there. It's actually up at the top. We can see that NIST actually says that the CVE was published on May 14th. I happen to know that it actually existed and was made aware in 2023. So these vulnerabilities always exist before. Clearly, they are a pen tester finds the vulnerability, discloses them to the company. Many times they're looking for a bounty. That's why they invest their time in order to do this. And then it takes a while for the fix to be in. And then many times there's exposure of the CVE, which finally brings us to Alexi's website. So if you are not aware of it, there is a website, fm-security.com. It is by a bona fide security researcher who also happens to work with FileMaker. There is also another gentleman, which is right here. His name is David Heyman. He also is a pen tester and does discovery with regards to FileMaker. Now, there are multiple vulnerabilities, and I am only going to go through a few of them here and just to give you a sense of how they actually work. I'm not going to go into the details because you can clearly read the articles for yourself. But on the FileMaker-security.com website, we can see that there are 3 of them, and notice that the article date is October of 2024. Well, if you truly want to know when things sort of happened, and as I mentioned, just because the CVE has a publish date of, let's say, May 14th. If we go use the Wayback Machine, can be found at archive.org, where there's this giant crawler or worm, however you think about it, goes out across the internet and crawls things. We can see that we've got on May 24th, on the 29th, there was a Nginx server that was spun up for fm-security.com. So Alexei was already going to be publishing this. And if we advance this just once, moving to October, we can see that in October 6th, he had started to put out information. And we can see that it had a date of April 13th, 2024. So again, this goes back, actually, the discovery of the holes themselves are always done before the publish date. I've belabored that. So let's go through the vulnerabilities themselves. The first one is a dylib, or a dynamic library. On Linux, they'll have the extension of .so for a shared object. In Windows, it will be a DLL, or a dynamically linked library. Whatever it is, software in the past has always been flexible in that it's made up of all of these components, and many times if the component itself is updated, you just want to be able to dynamically load that in and actually take advantage of it. Now, FileMaker has done this, and you can see this when you actually open a copy of FileMaker. So here is a copy of FileMaker. I'm going to right-click on this. I'm going to show the package contents. That's going to open up, and then we are going to expand this thing called Framework. Now, these frameworks are what FileMaker actually runs on. FileMaker uses these frameworks, the DB engine and the FM engine. These are the Draco engines that you've heard about. This is what makes FileMaker FileMaker. Sparkle, that is a third-party framework that deals with how FileMaker is now doing updates, and it existed long before FileMaker. If you've been in FileMaker for a long time, you know that FileMaker, for the longest amount of time, was running their own updater. They didn't have that baked into the software where it communicated with a server, said, is there an update? Okay, I'm going to self-update and update myself. Well, that's what Sparkle does. Well, all of these other items right here, these dylibs, are dynamic libraries that FileMaker uses. One in particular is this orb. Object relational, I forget what orb stands for. You'd have to look it up. But this deals with the data itself. Well, these dynamic libraries on the local system, they can be modified. So in this one article about dylib, I'm going to let you go through the article if you want the details. I'm going to give you just a overview so that we can get to the other more serious issue in FileMaker. We can see that here again, Alexei's made mention of the dynamic libraries. As you go through this, he explains the dynamic library. And when it comes to compiling the software, if you're going to run a copy of Xcode, what he's got is you are able to basically, it's not an override, but you're able to say, I want you to dynamically compile this my version of a library in place of this library, and that's essentially what FileMaker was allowing to actually happen. As you get down through here, you get to this point where you can see that there is a list of, let's call them directives. If you read the article, you'll find out. But one of the directives in here was, I forget what, not audio, information. You may need to read, there is in here somewhere, allow DYD environment variables. So one of these within here basically says that one right there that I have highlighted on screen, where they, the way that Claris was compiling their own copy of FileMaker was allowing for other libraries to be injected in by disabling their own library validation, which includes the fact that when an application is compiled, each of the libraries are signed, and when that software boots up, it many times can look at the signatures. If they don't match, and you've got a library that has a different signature, then it's going to fail. More or less, I believe I'm explaining it correct. If not, leave a comment down below. If you're David, if you're Alexei, if you're a security researcher, That more or less is what was going on. Because of this one single flag, you could dynamically compile in your own library. That library in turn could then do all kinds of different things, which we will see in the next vulnerability is one of the things that we need to be aware of, which, if you have heard the term man in the middle, this is the ability to stick something in between a process where something is happening where from point A to point Z, if you expect that there's nothing in between and you say, if there's an authentication or a validation process that says, hey, you over here on the other end, you server, what have you, are you who you say you are? And the server gets back and says, yes, I am who I say I am. That's all good and fine as long as we get from A to Z. But if in between A to Z, you stick something in the middle, or somebody can get in the middle, whether it's an SSL server or it's software that can get in the middle on the actual client machine, what happens is it goes to that first, goes to the server gives a response, and then what you see is if the response is not what you want, you report back to the software something else. And that is the key vulnerability that we found that we're talking about here. So as we go back to the main page of FM Security, this FMS bypass authorization. This is the security hole, the CVE that we're talking about, that is this 2790 that Alexi found, that hails all the way back to the earlier days of FileMaker. That's David's website, where we go into this, and I'm just going to spend, again, you can read the article. Here it is on screen. Go to fm-security.com, look at the posts, look at bypass auth. When we scroll through this, I am not going to spend a lot of time, but what's interesting is Alexi even shot, and here it is, that is full, unrestricted access and no traces of its use. This is what I'm talking about. This is the ghost account. Again, those two numbers. If you're using a FileMaker server, if you're using a host, and you have access to go into your FileMaker server, and you can see that it is not 19.6.4, and it is not 20.3.2. If it's anything earlier, your server is wide open. Alexi has put the information out here, and I promise you there are other hackers that, based on the information he's given, it is not that hard to replicate what he's doing here. It's a few bits. Once you find the bits and you switch them and you stick something in the middle, there we go. But what Alexi had done is he shot a video. This is actually a different video intro, but you can see right here what's going on, where he establishes a connection through a proxy. So he's got a client. It's going to go to some software that he writes himself, that he controls, that in turn connects to FileMaker Server. So here's our point A, here's our point Z. Rather than going to the destination, he goes to his server, or to his software on his local machine. That then contacts FileMaker Server. FileMaker Server gives back a response. And what's really interesting about what he found is the response. You can see right here, he's got fake success, connect to database, phase 3, fake success. What he's doing is his proxy is saying, I see what you gave back, but what I want client to understand is that client, you're going to understand that you have something different than the failure that the server gave back. And what he gives his client is what you got was a success. And because of what FileMaker Server transfers, which is just one little piece of information, which is it's this database, his proxy returns to his client, which as we scroll down here, he's got some great graphs. Here is the Omni Orb. He talks about Corba. I won't get into that. Again, read the article if you truly want the understanding. It is thorough. It is great. But if we get to this graph right here, where phase 2 and phase 3 are roughly the same thing, what he's got in this graph is your client can make a request to server. Server will give back a list of the databases and little IDs for each of the databases. Once you've got the ID, his client then sends via his proxy, I want to interact with this database and I want to provide this authentication. When the authentication comes back and it says failed, what he has his proxy do is tell his client, no, what you actually did is you succeeded. And at that point, the connection is then made between A and Z that says, oh yeah, everything is kosher on this regard, because what was happening is it was not being validated back and forth. And so this little ninja guy that he puts right here, this is the man in the middle where the result that comes back to the client actually ends up being faked as successful. And this is where you were able to get in as a ghost, is because the client, the server more or less, never sees that the client actually made a legitimate connection. So it doesn't even log that, which is so fascinating. And it's all based on something that has existed all the way back in FileMaker's history with how it was actually written, running over port 5003. Now, what did Claris implement I'd like to think that they sort of implemented this. I don't know whether they happened to be doing it at the same time or if they did it because of, but you can see that we have this feature now where we can use port 443 or the SSL secure layer of HTTPS in order to communicate from FileMaker client to FileMaker server, meaning you can bypass port 5003, which is where this hole was actually found. That's great and all, but you have to turn on 443 both on the server and on the client, and there's no programmatic way to turn it on the client end. That's something that has to be done with a setting. So you have to plan out the security setup of your environment. And number one, you have to get off of these old insecure servers or demand that your host actually does. This is so important because the information is out there. More and more people are going to be aware of it, and they're going to know what to do with it. So that was the major item, the ability that you can get into FileMaker Server. You're basically a ghost, you're not seen, and you have full access to do whatever you want. Well, there's one other escalation that we have here, a FileMaker Security privilege escalation. This one is nowhere near as severe. You can see that Alexei is actually referencing his CVEs on his article. It is a great resource to go to, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but this is by far the most massive vulnerable bug. Again, those two numbers, if your server is not those two numbers, you are wide open exposed. Literally, it's like going to the middle of, I don't know, any public place that you can think of, and you're walking around naked. Your database is exposed. All right, we have another pen tester, David Heyman, or Haman, I hope I'm saying that one correctly. He has a couple of articles. This is a great website to go to if you're security minded. You can see that these articles also came out in 2024. There is another article that he's got in 2024. Again, these have been around for a long time. So this one article that David has called Exploring the FMP12 File Format. This is what I was talking about with regards to passware. It has existed all the way back to FileMaker, as I said, FileMaker 3, where you could extract the password. There's nothing new about this other than what David did is he wrote an article that literally explains exactly how to do it and where it's stored. And this had just been figured out by Passware long before David actually wrote the report on it. Passware has been out there. If you don't know, I'm going to walk you through the process of setting up your FileMaker database and making sure that it is encrypted. I'm going to do that after we cover just one other item from David, and then we're going to wrap this video up because I've covered a lot. And if you want more security information, I've obviously given you the resources right here. David has also found another exploit that deals with in this world of REST. So here's the situation. And one thing you need to be aware of with regards to security. If you put any stored secret that is not temporal in nature, meaning it's based on a very limited amount of time. If you put that into a FileMaker file and that FileMaker file becomes available on a client device, again, once the file can be accessed, if it's not encrypted, then it can be hacked with a tool in order to either, in this case, replace the master password and gain full access. So encryption at rest is number one right there. But beyond that, when you get into the realm of REST and the way that a server is going to communicate, so FileMaker has an admin API where you can tell FileMaker Server, you turn it on server, but you can tell server, I want you to do these things, and you can create a FileMaker database. There's a couple of tools out there. One is by Soliant, and another one is by Klaus Lavent, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Two super useful tools that uses the REST API. Well, this deals with the access with regards to roles and how, again, because of REST, he found a hole where you can get access. So this particular CVE, again, if you want to find it or verify it, you can go over to NIST. It is probably there. Let's actually switch to it. Let's see. That's 40768. We go over here. 40768. Is it listed? It's not listed. 40768. So that would be something that we would need to actually look up specifically. So out of the 16 that I found here that do include the word FileMaker, it's interesting that it does not have that listed. I'd actually go do a search for it. I won't do it here live as of the recording of this, but in essence, David has made all of the information available here on his website if you're interested and you want to find out. So with regards to whitelisting IP addresses and restricting access, that actually was not working. You've got a X forwarded 4. If you're not familiar with HTTP headers, you need to brush up on the HTTP protocol, REST, how it works, etc. Otherwise, if you're not interested in it and you're not dealing with it, somebody else is doing it for you. And if somebody else is doing it for you and you log into your FileMaker host and your FileMaker host, they knew nothing about this security and they're on FileMaker 20.1, then you might want to look at who's hosting your solutions and whether or not they are security focused with that regard. But here are all of your CVEs. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this video is I'm going to transition here. We're going to go into FileMaker. I'm just going to go through a few of the security related things that you should know with regards to when you're using client, some privilege settings, briefly talk about those, and then also setting up the encryption at rest if you have not been using that, and how you can see on server whether that is or is not the case. So you find yourself asking the question, where should you host your FileMaker solution? Well, one of those dots right there. That's what I would pick. Now, they didn't come to me. I went to them. And I trust fmcloud.fm with all of my data. They are using the latest tech. In fact, did you know Claris is actually, in some instances, releasing features first and only for Linux. What does fmcloud.fm use? They use Linux. On top of that, they use containerization. And if you've not heard about containerization, then you will be. It's one of the best ways to host your FileMaker solution. I highly suggest that you check out fmcloud.fm. All right, for the remainder of this video, what we're going to do is just go through some of the areas of FileMaker with regards to security that you should be aware of, that may be things that you've carried forward that you don't even know that they were a security issue that you potentially had. First, let's go through our security settings on our client. First thing we're going to do is we're going to be concerned about when we are using client. The world of FileMaker, people share files, they give all kinds of stuff, but you never know. It's sort of like links. Unfortunately, links used to be something that, there weren't as many nefarious people out there where you could just click on a link and expect that it's not going to hurt you. But now you've got to worry about links in email, links here, PDFs running JavaScript. Everybody who is bad out there in the world have these tools in order to actually do things, and it's a constant cat and mouse game with regards to somebody finds something in the operating system. Well, now it needs to be patched. old legacy software that is still used in many, many ways and areas of computing have things that are still going to be discovered on a daily basis. So in FileMaker, what we are interested in is how do we protect ourselves? We've got all of our settings right here. Two of the most important settings with regards to client is this one right here. You want to uncheck this. FileMaker may have this checked. By default, you never want to allow a FileMaker solution that you open to be able to install a plugin without your knowledge. And that's exactly what the FileMaker script step does. If this is checked and you go get a demo file, that demo file has a container field. In the container field, there is a plugin, and that plugin gets silently installed onto your machine. Then that file or any other file can do whatever it wants. Uncheck this option. You can also see what plugins are installed by clicking this right here and revealing those. The second item is go to the permitted, and we're not going to talk about all of the different there's no way that I could talk about all of the different security aspects of FileMaker with regards to files that can open other files, privilege sets, what those privilege sets can and do. The realm of security knowledge in FileMaker is up to you, and I highly suggest that you always keep yourself informed about what the implications are. From a client standpoint, we want to have this checked right here. Warn me before an FMP URL opens a file. This isn't as impactful, but anything that we can click on the web that has the FMP : / that is going to tell FileMaker to open some type of file or to do something. We want to know about it, or at least I do. If you don't care and you leave this unchecked, then maybe you're not as security minded. Those are two of the things that are specific to us as a developer working on our FileMaker client or in our development environment. Now we get to our security privilege settings. When I go into our security, which is always going to be found under our manage and then our security, I have a shortcut key set to Command-Shift-A. I'm doing that in the operating system. For some reason, FileMaker has always loved this mindset that we are an easy-to-use, low-code solution. Okay, granted, you can get away with being low-code and doing things low-code, and you can hide things from people, but in my opinion, it's not very smart. FileMaker is extremely powerful. You can do all kinds of things, and it's hidden down here. They did this, I forget, it's probably within the last 10 years that they did this, where they hide the advanced security settings because, ooh, they're scary. No, they're there, and you should learn about them. Why? Because we continually get into an area or a world where you need to be security conscious. The number one thing that we're looking at, which is both beneficial and can be consequential, are extended privileges. FileMaker has a long history of basically making its privileges modular through extended privileges. If you have never gone into FileMaker's extended privileges and taken a look at these, or are completely unaware of them, you're absolutely missing out. These are all of the ways that FileMaker has implemented the ability for a FileMaker database to interact with the outside world. WebDirect, we turn that on if we want to enable a file for WebDirect. FMXDBC, which is our ODBC and JDBC connections. They require a bit of a painful driver in some cases. FMApp. We always have to have this one on in order to communicate with FileMaker. Otherwise, you can't even connect to the file. You can put a file on FileMaker Server and not have this selected, meaning no client can get into it. Although I'd be interested. I wonder if Alexi tested whether or not the absence of this actually allows that ghost account to actually get in. If he watches this video, maybe he'll go do that. Authentication. This is a re-authentication time. There's also some hidden tips. If you don't know about this, these values that we get in, notice that this button has edit on here. I can click and I can edit this. Claris didn't set this, and I'm not able to not control this. And what's interesting about this is this value at the end can actually be controlled. This right now is saying after the specified minutes. So if I change this from 10 to 5, guess what? That changes the amount of time that FileMaker is going to use before it asks for reauthentication, say, for example, with regards to FileMaker Go. So if you didn't know that, you can create additional items of these. I can leave the 10 here if I want, and I can also duplicate this or create a new one, also put FM reauthenticate to 10. I have videos that I've shot in the past. You can use extended privileges. What we have here on screen, you can use in order to have the ability to do something within your solution that extends across multiple privilege sets. If you don't know that about extended privileges, that is one thing that you can do. XML. Claris is trying to kill it off, but it is the free way to still access FileMaker data using XML. Likewise, PHP, there are still ways to use use PHP. This right here, and this right here. These three are recent additions within the past decade, I would say. I don't know exactly when they came out. You'll have to go research it. But these are additions that were made to FileMaker because of security holes. So let's talk about them. Script access. I don't know, quite honestly, the extent to which you were able to do things with ActiveX. The ActiveX ability to interact with a FileMaker database on Windows is not, as far as my understanding goes, it is not as exhaustive as Apple Events. Now, on the Macintosh side of things, if you had a FileMaker database, and what's interesting is a lot of legacy FileMaker solutions have these items checked. When they were added, FileMaker Claris, FileMaker Inc. in the past, is always taking a very permissive approach towards security. In other words, they want to let people do things because it's easy. They want to make it easy for people. They don't want people to have to learn, do I really want to turn this on, and what are the implications? Because the implication is using AppleScript and Apple Events, you're able to do tons of amount of discovery. You can discover every single script that's in a FileMaker file and then arbitrarily execute them at will via AppleScript if this is turned on. And in many cases, you may have an older FileMaker solution and you go into the privilege set and you're looking at this full access privilege set, you open it, and for some reason, unbeknownst to you, probably because it was a legacy system set up by an older developer, oh yeah, this is checked, and anybody can run anything with AppleScript. Anybody can run something with a URL, which if you don't know, if in the URL, it allows you to run and basically convert a variable into a value. I don't know whether it evaluates that variable, but there are security holes where you can, within the URL, if you can discover what the scripts are, you can then run whatever script you want. And if you can run whatever script you want, and that script in turn has, this is why a lot of developers avoid the evaluate like the plague. There are places for the evaluate function, as long as you know what the security implications are. The unfortunate thing is, many FileMaker developers, except you, because you're watching this video, don't know that because this is checked in the Monkey Bread plugin or some other plugin that can run things against the operating system is exposing that database to exfiltration, meaning being able to get the database off of the server, and if it's unencrypted, being able to get full access to the full contents. It is because of these little things that a legacy system, a developer does not go in and review, are these things actually used, and turning them off because in the past they were turned on automatically by default. How do you find out whether or not they are actually used? Well, that's going to be a matter of using your analysis tools. That's going to be Base Elements. It's going to be Inspector Pro or FM Perception. You are going to need to go look for specific script steps that actually do take advantage of ActiveX, Apple Events, AppleScript syntax. You can search these things. You can do it without those tools, by the way. If you want to, you can always export the structure of a database, and there's two ways to do it. You can do it the old DDR way, or you can do it the newer XML way, and then simply just search that gigantic XML file, looking specifically for Apple script code, looking for Apple event script steps, etc. If they're not used and these are turned on, turn them off. They are security holes. Likewise, validate cross-plugin access. MBS is extremely popular. I love MBS, but MBS comes with the potential for a lot of security holes. In fact, if you are using MBS, then more than likely you've probably just said, oh yeah, Matt says use MBS. It's great. I'm just going to use it and I'm going to drop it onto my server. If you are not understanding the security implications of what you are installing to your software, then it is not on me just because I'm saying something is absolutely a great tool to use. It is on you to make sure that you know what's going on. The MBS plugin has over 7,000 possible functions, but the MBS in its own suite of functions has the ability to disable all functions and selectively enable only the functions that you want to use. So if you are not aware of it and you have not heard the terms whitelisting and blacklisting within the realm of security or spam email or whatever, then you are at a disadvantage because you're dropping something onto your server that wholesale can do whatever any hacker wants once they get access to that particular tool. So it is up to you to know, and I'm letting you know through this video, that the MBS has two functions that you can call. They let you disable specific functions that MBS has or enable a limited set of functions that you want to make available on server, such that if your server is hacked, you do not enable the file or the I/O operations that allow a database to then be transferred and sent via curl to some unknown country where you have no idea what they're going to do with your database. So be aware of what these are and whether or not you truly need to enable them. And I will also tell you this. When it comes to security, I do not avoid what I have highlighted on screen, but I selectively use them in a way that only exposes them in a minimal fashion. In the realm of security, where we are working with FileMaker, what is so critical in the landscape of security is how many and what are the vectors of attack? In other words, what is exposed and how can a hacker get access to what they're going to use? If I'm going to use a plugin or if I'm going to use a URL in order to run something, many times I will use a dedicated file that will support the functionality that I want to access and use that as a broker or an arbitrator in order to get access to my main solution, because I know that I'll be able to have a better level of granular control over that one file that is exposing whatever it's exposing before it actually gets access to the whole enchilada. That is fundamentally how you should approach security when it comes to devising your FileMaker system. Now, I realize that a lot of FileMaker developers and solutions that you maybe inherit or get access to are just developed by a knowledge worker. FileMaker is immensely empowering, but a knowledge worker who doesn't take the time to understand what they're implementing by, one, understanding extended privileges, understanding what the extended privilege actually can gain access to, a la a plugin, which is all powerful and can do whatever it wants on the operating system. That is for you to do and implement based on what you've inherited. So doing a security review, I don't do them myself. Maybe David does. Discard those, Matt. Maybe Alexi does. I definitely know, gosh dang it with the allow. That again is the problem. This is one of the things that Apple is doing themselves. The OS 18, Apple has become so security conscious. I don't know if you noticed what I just did, but it's actually a byproduct of being basically allowing people to be ignorant of what's going on by continually showing all of these dialogues. There was an article that I was reading about the new Bluetooth security that they're putting in the new version of Mac. I forget what it is. I'm still on Ventura when I'm shooting this video. And basically, Bluetooth prompts you so incessantly, so many times, that it basically makes you numb to the security of what you're clicking, and you just do what I just did, which is an absolutely bad thing. You go into security, into FileMaker Security, you're in there, and you just want to get on. You just want to move along. You made some changes. You went into the access. You made a couple of checks, and you're like, you get a phone call or whatever. You click OK. You click cancel. You want to get out of here. Cancel. You're in dialogue hell, is what I call it. And you're just like, oh, fine, just discard it. You take actions because you have been numbed because of all of the security. So, moral of the story of this video is be aware. The last thing I'm leaving you with, if you don't know about it, please, please, please just encrypt your solutions. I know that it's a bit of a pain. What we have here on screen is an image of FileMaker Server. If you see this right here, that little lock with the little warning on your FileMaker hosted provider, your solution is not encrypted at rest. Your solution is open. It is available. Anybody can see it. Clearly, we can see that in this scenario, this is the only database is open, but these databases, they still can be discovered even though they're not opened. FileMaker will still report that these databases are here. And this database in particular, if it can be pulled off of FileMaker Server, it is completely open and hackable because it's not encrypted. So how do you use encryption at rest? There's two ways that you can do this. Inside the FileMaker client, they provide the tools. Outside of the FileMaker client, there is a command line tool that Claris does provide. Inside the tool, it is simply right up here. You go to Tools, you go to Developer Utilities. Within the Developer Utilities, you are simply going to add your file. You click on Add. You're going to add the file that you're going to encrypt. I'm going to add this security file. It actually can't be done because in this particular case, it is currently open. So I would need to close the file, which is this one right here that I have open. Let's go ahead and close it. Cancel, close. Go to our developer tools, developer utilities, click add, add my solution. At this standpoint, we are going to go to the options. Everything here has to be set. So I do need to set a folder. I would select that. Usually I just go to a folder relative to where the solution is. But this is the option right here. Enable database encryption. We want to turn that on. You cannot disable the log without actually enabling it. You are going to put in your FileMaker account and your password. Absolutely critical. Do this to every single file that you put up on FileMaker Server. Do not be lackadaisical about this. I promise you, it's just good peace of mind. And what is the second way that you can do this? Well, if we switch over to Term, or to my terminal here, Claris does provide a tool called the FM Developer Tool. I've done a command here on the command line called which tells me where it is. I have made a symlink. You will not find this tool on your operating system unless you go download the FileMaker Developer Tool from Claris, put it into a location where your path, and I'm not going to explain your environment, but if I type env here, I'm going to get a bunch of my environment and what's going on with my environment. But with that tool, I should be able to put an FM developer tool, and I should be able to type help. And actually, that will come up, and it will tell me all of the things that this particular developer tool can do. One of those things is you can write a bash script or a Python script or a Perl script or whatever script you want to use that uses this tool that automatically does the encryption for you. And there are tools that will upload your database for you. I don't know if Auto uses this tool or not. I haven't gotten into Auto or some of the automated deployment options that will more or less use these tools in order to apply the encryption that you want. But there again, many times your encryption or the password that you're using, if you're storing that in a FileMaker database, which itself is not encrypted, is potentially a problem. Personally, I use a password database store, in my case, 1Password, and that is the only place that my encryption at rest password exists. Even when I host the file on FileMaker Server, when you load an encrypted file, it asks you for that password to save the password on server so that it can reload again. I don't even do that. I rely on server's ability with regards to administration and getting emails that when the server goes down, I want to be notified, and then I will go in, investigate, and re-add my password. I don't even put my password as a saved password. I do it in a few rare instances where I really don't care if the file, if that particular password. Here's another thing. Matt, do you use a unique individual encryption at rest password for every one of my databases? In my particular case, I don't. There may be 1, 2, or 3 different databases that make up a collection of solutions, or the way that I break them down, and they will use the same password for multiple of them. And what I do is in my password database, I will then, for that particular password, list the databases that actually use that password. Because otherwise, quite honestly, if you have 15 different files that you're going to open on FileMaker Server and you're not going to store the encryption at rest password on server, which I do not suggest, then having to enter that the 15 different times, yes, it's a bit of a hassle. Is it worth the price? That's all dependent on your level of your security risk assessment and willingness to have things be out there. Again, security practices, you should always be interested, and it is my hope that this video has given you a good, solid understanding. I cannot understate that the article that we saw and the ability for a ghost account to get into a FileMaker server hosted anywhere, it is trivial to go find a listing of FileMaker databases on the web. There are multiple ways. Google has keywords in URL, in text. There are ways to literally find hundreds, it used to be thousands and thousands, of FileMaker solutions on the web, and then just go poke at them. How long do you think it's going to take with all of this information out, which it's probably already been out there in the hacker world, of how to gain access? There's whole databases of exploits that script kiddies can download and run against things. Just check your FileMaker server. That's all I can say for this video as being the most important thing. David and Alexi, thank you so much for the work that you do. If you've watched this video, I'm sorry if it's been painful for you. Please clarify anything in the comments below or on the magazine article, because security is something that we should all be interested in. And if I've done a disservice by providing any type of information that was incorrect in this video, please correct me. And as always, I'd like to wish you much luck with your own FileMaker development. And until next time, happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.